Blood trickled down Dr. Maya Wilson's temple as the officer pressed her face against the cold pavement. "Please," she whispered, fingers inching toward her phone. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The officer laughed, unaware that 3 satellites had just repositioned overhead, capturing everything. "Where are you watching from today?" Before we dive into this shocking confrontation between an elite commander and 2 prejudiced officers, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. The story I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you think you know about power justice and what happens when people underestimate a black woman in America. Ready to witness what happens when systemic racism meets invisible authority. Let's get into it. Dr. Maya Wilson gripped her steering wheel tightly, carefully navigating her sleek, midnight blue Tesla through the winding streets of Oak Ridge Heights. At 38, she had finally purchased her dream home in this exclusive Virginia neighborhood after years of dedicated service to her country. The colonial-style mansion represented more than just luxury. It symbolized breaking another barrier in her extraordinary life. As the director of the classified Umbra Unit, America's most elite counterterrorism task force, Maya was accustomed to navigating dangerous situations with precision and calm. Yet driving through this predominantly white neighborhood as a black woman still required a different kind of vigilance. She checked her rearview mirror, noticing a police cruiser that had been following her for the past 3 blocks. Maya took a deep breath, maintaining exactly 3 miles under the speed limit, as she had done since spotting them. When she signaled and turned into the circular driveway of her new home, the cruiser's lights flashed to life, bathing the manicured hedges in pulses of blue and red. "Perfect," she muttered, already knowing what was coming. Officers Ryan Delaney and Thomas Schultz watched the Tesla for several moments before approaching. Delaney, a stocky man with cropped blonde hair and 22 years on the force, took the lead while Schultz, taller and leaner, with a perpetual scowl, positioned himself strategically by the vehicle's rear. "License and registration," Delaney demanded without preamble or explanation for the stop. Maya reached slowly for her documents, maintaining eye contact. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer? I wasn't speeding." Delaney's face hardened. "We've had reports of break-ins in the area. You match a description." Maya handed over her driver's license and registration, noting that no probable cause had been established for the stop. "This is my home," she explained calmly. "I just moved in last week." Schultz moved closer, hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "Pretty nice place. How long have you been working here?" The implication was clear. He assumed she was household staff, not the homeowner. Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. "I don't work here. I own this house." She pointed to the mailbox, clearly marked Wilson. Delaney examined her identification with exaggerated scrutiny. "Dr. Maya Wilson. What kind of doctor are you exactly?" The disbelief in his voice was palpable. "I have a Ph.D. in international security and a medical degree specializing in trauma surgery," she replied evenly, omitting her multiple other credentials. "Now, may I please enter my home?" Schultz stepped closer, his body language increasingly aggressive. "We're going to need additional proof that you live here. This is an exclusive neighborhood with a certain profile of residents." His emphasis on profile made it abundantly clear what he meant. Maya discreetly tapped her smartwatch twice, activating its recording function. This interaction was now being logged, geotagged, and encrypted in real time. "Officer Schultz," she said, reading his nameplate, "I've provided valid identification showing this address. I've answered your questions cooperatively. There is no legal basis to detain me further." The flash of surprise when she used his name quickly transformed into annoyance. In her mind, Maya was transported back to her childhood in Boston, her father's stern warnings playing like a recording, "Keep your hands visible. Speak respectfully. document everything, come home alive. Her father, a respected surgeon, had been pulled over 17 times in 1 year after moving to their predominantly white suburb. The memory sharpened her focus on the present danger. As tension escalated, Maya's neighbor, Wallace Peterson, emerged from his home across the street. The 60-year-old retired judge approached with concern. "Is everything all right, Dr. Wilson?" he called out. "These officers seem to think I don't belong here." Maya replied, maintaining her composure. Wallace frowned. "Officers, I can confirm this woman is my new neighbor. She purchased the Sullivan property last month." Despite this corroboration, Delaney and Schultz remained unmoved. "Sir, please return to your home. This is police business," Delaney ordered. Maya reached for her phone. "I'm calling my attorney. This has gone far enough." Before she could dial, Officer Delaney grabbed her wrist. "Put the phone down now," he barked, twisting her arm behind her back with unnecessary force. "You're interfering with police business." The sudden pain shot through Maya's shoulder as Schultz moved in, roughly spinning her against her car. "Spread your legs. Hands on the vehicle," he commanded, beginning to pat her down with inappropriate thoroughness. Maya complied, but spoke clearly. "I am not resisting. You have no probable cause for this detention or search. I am formally requesting your supervisor's presence." Delaney responded by tightening handcuffs around her wrists, cinching them until they bit into her skin. As they marched her toward their cruiser, Maya's mind was already calculating multiple scenarios and response options. This wasn't the first time she'd faced discrimination, but these officers had no idea they had just made the worst mistake of their careers. Maya sat rigidly in the back of the police cruiser, watching through the window as Officer Schultz rummaged through her Tesla without a warrant or consent. Her face remained impassive, but her mind raced with strategic calculations, cataloging every procedural violation. The handcuffs bit into her wrists, deliberately fastened too tight, a common intimidation tactic she had documented in hundreds of similar cases across the country. As director of Umbra, Maya had access to patterns of police misconduct that few in the world could see, including the 17 complaints filed against Officer Schultz for excessive force, all of them involving minorities, all of them dismissed. Officer Delaney stood nearby, speaking into his radio and occasionally glancing at Maya with smug satisfaction. Neither officer had any concept of who they had just detained. Dr. Maya Wilson's journey to becoming one of the most powerful covert operatives in American history began at Harvard, where she simultaneously completed medical school and a Ph.D. in international security at 24, graduating with highest honors. The FBI recruited her immediately, recognizing her unique combination of analytical brilliance, physical capability, and unshakable ethical compass. Within 5 years, she had distinguished herself by uncovering 3 deep-cover foreign intelligence networks operating on American soil. By 30, she had served as special advisor to 2 presidents on counterterrorism strategy. But it was the Caracas crisis that had brought her to the attention of those who controlled America's most classified programs. When terrorists seized the American embassy with 67 hostages, conventional response teams deemed the situation unresolvable without massive casualties. Maya proposed an unconventional solution that saved 65 lives. The following week, she was approached about leading Umbra. The ultra-classified unit consisted of only 7 individuals, each extraordinary in their own right, but together forming what intelligence insiders called the most dangerous task force on Earth. Jackson Reed, former Navy SEAL with 37 confirmed high-value target extractions, handled tactical operations. Layla Chen, a cybersecurity prodigy who had exposed vulnerabilities in national defense networks at 16, now managed their digital operations with unprecedented access to global systems. Intelligence analyst Omar Patel possessed an eidetic memory and had predicted 9 major geopolitical events before any intelligence agency saw them coming. Gabriel Vega, their logistics specialist, could procure anything from anywhere with no questions asked, from experimental aircraft to untraceable identity packages. Dr. Vanessa Cooper, world-renowned expert in psychological warfare, designed influence operations that changed political landscapes without firing a shot. Weapons specialist Tyler Brooks had designed customized systems that remained unknown to the broader military complex. And Maya, with her unique combination of medical expertise, tactical knowledge, and strategic genius, bound them together as director. Umbra existed in the spaces between agencies, reporting directly to a small oversight committee with presidential authority. Their mandate addressed critical threats that conventional forces couldn't touch due to political, legal, or practical constraints. Their existence was known to fewer than 20 people in government. When Maya's smartwatch detected the abnormal heart rate and stress indicators, it automatically activated emergency protocols. The small device sent encrypted burst transmissions to secure servers, alerting the Umbra team to her situation. Within moments, 3 military satellites repositioned to provide continuous surveillance of her location. Jackson Reed, who had been training recruits at Quantico, immediately signed out and headed toward Oak Ridge Heights. Layla Chen, working from her apartment in Arlington, began accessing local police networks, traffic cameras, and communication systems. The others moved to their stations, preparing for contingencies ranging from simple extraction to full-scale crisis response. In the cruiser, Maya observed Officer Schultz triumphantly holding up her credentials case. Inside was her Umbra identification, classified at the highest levels and carrying authorization codes that would send shockwaves through any legitimate law enforcement database. "Would you look at this?" Schultz called to Delaney, laughing. "This lady's carrying fake federal credentials, high-quality fakes, too." He approached the cruiser window, holding up her ID. "Sweetheart, impersonating a federal officer is a serious crime. Want to explain this fantasy ID before we add more charges?" Maya remained silent, watching him through calculating eyes. She had faced down terrorist leaders and corrupt generals, men responsible for genocide and mass atrocities. Schultz's petty intimidation barely registered. At the local police station 3 miles away, Captain Michael Reeves was reviewing incident reports when his secure line rang. This phone, installed by federal authorities for emergency communications, had never rung in his 7 years as captain. The voice on the other end spoke with calm authority. "Captain Reeves, this is Control. Security level Alpha 0. Confirmation code Sierra Tango 973. Echo. You have 2 officers, Delaney and Schultz, currently detaining a federal asset. This situation requires immediate remediation. Acknowledge receipt." Reeves, a 20-year veteran who had served with distinction in military police. Before joining civilian law enforcement, felt his blood run cold. Alpha 0 clearance meant presidential authority. Whatever his officers had stumbled into was far beyond their jurisdiction. "Acknowledged," he responded, already reaching for his keys. "Moving to location now." Back at the scene, Maya finally spoke, her voice measured and controlled despite the circumstances. "Officer Schultz, I'm giving you one last chance to correct this situation. Verify my credentials through proper channels, release me immediately, and we can discuss appropriate remediation for this incident." Schultz leaned closer to the window, his face contorted with contempt. "Listen, you uppity bitch," he whispered, ensuring his partner wouldn't hear the slur. "I don't know what scam you're running, but there's no way someone like you belongs in this neighborhood unless you're cleaning the toilets. Your fake ID and attitude just bought you a night in lockup." Maya looked directly into his eyes, her gaze steady and unperturbed. "That's your final decision?" she asked quietly. Schultz smirked. "Damn right it is." Maya nodded almost imperceptibly. "Understood." As the cruiser pulled away from her home, Maya closed her eyes briefly, focusing her thoughts. Umbra protocols for civilian authority conflicts were clear: minimum force, maximum effectiveness, absolute discretion. The officers had made their choice. Now they would learn exactly who they had handcuffed in their back seat and the full weight of consequences that came with their actions. The wheels of a justice they couldn't possibly comprehend were already in motion. The police cruiser carrying Maya pulled into the station parking lot, Officers Schultz and Delaney maintaining their facade of having captured someone significant. How does it feel to witness such blatant abuse of power? The confident smirks on their faces betrayed their complete ignorance of the storm gathering around them with each passing minute. Delaney roughly escorted Maya through the station's back entrance, deliberately parading her past other officers and detainees. "Got a live one here," he announced loudly. "Breaking and entering, resisting arrest, and fake federal credentials. Thinks she owns a mansion in Oak Ridge Heights." Several officers chuckled while others barely looked up from their paperwork. Only Desk Sergeant Olivia Rodriguez observed the scene with visible concern, her 27 years of experience triggering internal alarms. "What's the probable cause for the initial stop?" she asked, her tone professional but pointed. Schultz stepped forward. Suspicious vehicle in a high-end neighborhood, multiple recent break-ins in the area. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed slightly. And the specific suspicious activity was, Delaney shifted uncomfortably. Subject matched the general profile of recent suspects. Rodriguez looked directly at Maya, noting her composed demeanor. Expensive clothing and the perfectly applied handcuffs that were clearly too tight. "I'll need that profile description for the paperwork," she said, knowing no such official profile existed. Maya observed this exchange carefully mentally, cataloging Rodriguez as a potential ally within the department's power structure. This wasn't the first time Oak Ridge Heights residents had filed complaints about selective enforcement. Over the past 3 years, every black visitor or new resident had been stopped at least once with similar justifications offered. The department had dismissed these patterns as coincidence, but Maya's team had already compiled a statistical analysis proving targeted enforcement. The booking process proceeded with Schultz accidentally banging Maya's shoulder against the doorframe while leading her to processing. Throughout the procedure, Maya remained silent, mentally mapping the station's layout, security protocols, and personnel dynamics. Each face, each interaction, each procedural deviation was cataloged with clinical precision. Meanwhile, Umbra's response accelerated. Layla Chen had already accessed the department's internal systems, discovering a troubling pattern of incidents involving minorities in affluent neighborhoods. Using backdoor access to the National Crime Information Center, she planted flags that would trigger alerts if anyone ran Maya's information properly. Omar Patel analyzed the department's public records personnel files and community complaints, identifying statistical anomalies that suggested systematic discriminatory practices. The station's booking officer took Maya's fingerprints with unnecessary roughness. "System's running slow today," he muttered, not realizing that Layla was monitoring his terminal in real time, controlling exactly what information would appear when Maya's prints were processed. In Washington, D.C., FBI Director Harrison Mills was in a budget meeting when his secure phone vibrated with an Umbra alert code. He excused himself immediately. "What's the situation, what?" he asked once in a secure location. The briefing was concise. Dr. Maya Wilson, Umbra Director, detained by local police under questionable circumstances. Preliminary assessment indicated targeted racial profiling. "Jesus Christ," Mills whispered. "Those poor bastards have no idea what they've done." He authorized full operational support while maintaining the unit's cover. "And Harrison," the voice added, "she's handling this personally." Mills understood the implications. "Keep me updated. I'll clear any roadblocks from Washington." Inside an interrogation room, Maya sat handcuffed to a table, having refused to answer questions without legal representation. Through the one-way glass, Schultz and Delaney discussed their approach. "She's hiding something big," Schultz insisted. "Nobody carries that kind of fake ID for small-time scams." Delaney seemed less certain. "What if we run the credentials through federal verification?" Schultz dismissed the suggestion. "Waste of time. Besides, I already checked her phone. Multiple calls to international numbers. Could be anything from fraud to terrorism." This casual admission of an illegal search without warrant further confirmed Maya's assessment. These officers routinely violated procedures, confident they would face no consequences. Captain Michael Reeves arrived at the station 17 minutes after receiving the secure call. His expression was grim as he requested the booking information. "Conference room now," he ordered Schultz and Delaney after reviewing the file, "and bring me all evidence collected during the stop." The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Other officers sensed the tension as their captain rarely intervened in routine bookings. Inside the conference room, Reeves closed the door. "Explain to me in detail your probable cause for stopping Dr. Wilson." The officers exchanged glances before Delaney responded with their practiced explanation about suspicious vehicles and break-in patterns. "And this profile you mentioned," Reeves continued, "is it department policy to include race as a suspicious indicator?" Schultz stiffened. "We never mentioned race, sir." Reeves laid out the intake forms. "Then why does your report specifically note subject did not match neighborhood demographic as an initial observation?" Before they could respond, the station's power fluctuated briefly. Seconds later, every computer screen displayed the same message: "System maintenance in progress. Stand by." This was Layla's work creating a digital smokescreen while she secured access to the building's security cameras. Maya finally revealed a fraction of her identity when Reeves entered the interrogation room. "Captain Suba," she said calmly, "I suggest you verify my credentials through the Federal Security Database immediately. Authorization code Victor Echo 97 Alpha. This situation has escalated beyond your department's jurisdiction." The specificity of the code and Maya's composed delivery caused Reeves to pause. 20 minutes later, after numerous phone calls to increasingly higher authorities, the station erupted into controlled chaos. Maya's handcuffs were removed by Reeves himself, who now looked pale and spoke with careful precision. "Dr. Wilson, on behalf of the department, I extend our most sincere apologies for this incident." Outside the station across town and in multiple locations throughout the state, Umbra team members were already in position. Jackson Reed observed the police station from a cafe across the street. Layla monitored all digital communications. The others prepared for contingencies ranging from quiet resolution to high-profile intervention. Senator James Lawrence, ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee and key ally of the Oak Ridge Heights development interests, received an urgent call from Richard Montgomery, president of the Oak Ridge Heights Association. "We might have a situation." Montgomery began, unaware that this call was already being recorded and analyzed by Omar Patel. "Two of our cooperative officers just detained someone who might cause problems for our neighborhood initiative. Do you believe these officers deserve consequences for their actions, or are they just doing their job? Comment number 1 if you think they should be held accountable, or number 2 if you believe they were justified in their approach. And if you're outraged by this abuse of authority, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of justice prevailing against discrimination. But what happens when Maya begins to uncover the bigger picture behind this random stop? Was this really just two prejudiced officers or part of something more systematic? Let's continue with the next part of this shocking true story. Captain Reeves paced nervously in his office, the blinds drawn as he processed the magnitude of what had happened under his command. Dr. Maya Wilson sat calmly across from his desk, her presence somehow commanding the space despite her recent mistreatment. "I want to see all records of police activity in Oak Ridge Heights for the past 3 years," Maya stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Reeves hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll have those files pulled immediately, Doctor." What neither discussed was the strange phenomenon affecting the station's electronic systems. Computers throughout the building had begun malfunctioning in seemingly random patterns. Security cameras cycled through peculiar glitches. Dispatch reported intermittent radio interference. The technical staff scrambled for explanations, unaware that Layla Chen was systematically mapping and controlling their digital infrastructure from miles away. Maya stood and walked confidently through the station, no longer a detainee, but moving with unmistakable authority. Officers who had smirked at her arrival now averted their eyes, or suddenly found paperwork requiring immediate attention. At the booking desk, Sergeant Rodriguez approached with a file. "Dr. Wilson, your personal effects," she said, her voice lowered, "and I've included something you might find interesting. Incident reports from Oak Ridge Heights that never made it to official statistics." Their eyes met in silent understanding before Maya accepted the file with a slight nod. Officer Schultz observed this interaction from across the room, his face darkening with suspicion and anger. In the evidence room, Maya was finally reunited with her credentials, the same ones Schultz had dismissed as fake. The booking officer's face drained of color as the identity confirmation appeared on his screen. Dr. Maya Wilson. Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient security clearance levels that required scrolling to view completely. "There's been a terrible mistake," he stammered. Maya regarded him coolly. "No, there hasn't been a mistake. This was deliberate, systematic, and part of a pattern. The mistake was choosing me as the target." Throughout the station, the realization spread rapidly. They had unlawfully detained someone with authority reaching the highest levels of government. Worse, the circumstances suggested racial profiling as the primary motivation. For Officers Delaney and Schultz, the gravity of their situation was beginning to sink in. Delaney sat shell-shocked in the break room, mentally reviewing every procedural violation they had committed. Schultz, however, had moved quickly to damage control, making hurried calls and deleting text messages from his personal phone. In a private conference room, Captain Reeves provided Maya with the department's complete records on Oak Ridge Heights. The pattern was unmistakable. Once compiled, 78% of all stops in the neighborhood involved non-white individuals, despite them representing less than 4% of visitors and residents. Citations were issued in 65% of these stops compared to 7% for white residents. "This isn't random," Maya noted, spreading the data before the increasingly uncomfortable captain. "This is policy, whether written or unwritten." The evidence revealed a disturbing relationship between police activity and the Oak Ridge Heights Association's membership patterns. Wherever a minority family purchased property, police presence increased dramatically in that specific area. Anonymous complaint calls surged, leading to pretextual stops and heightened scrutiny. Property values became a frequent justification in internal communications about enforcement priorities. Most troubling was the correlation between police activity and subsequent property sales. In 8 cases, minority homeowners had sold their properties below market value after experiencing months of police harassment. Maya's Umbra team had already positioned themselves strategically throughout the community. Jackson Reed, posing as a state police investigator, interviewed residents about their experiences. Omar Patel analyzed property records identifying a pattern of discounted purchases after harassment campaigns with properties often acquired by shell companies linked to the Oak Ridge Heights Association. Gabriel Vega established surveillance on key association members, documenting meetings with local officials. Maya uncovered the central figure in this operation, Richard Montgomery, president of the Oak Ridge Heights Association and prominent real estate developer. His connections extended to local government law enforcement leadership and even state politics through Senator James Lawrence. Montgomery's carefully crafted public image of philanthropic community leadership masked his orchestration of systematic housing discrimination. Association meeting minutes obtained through Layla's digital infiltration revealed coded discussions about maintaining neighborhood character and appropriate demographic balance. Financial records showed police foundation donations coinciding with increased enforcement in targeted areas. The most damning evidence came from a source within the department itself. Officer Sarah Jenkins, a recent transfer, approached Maya discreetly with printed emails detailing neighborhood integrity initiatives, directives from department leadership identifying priority monitoring areas that consistently corresponded with minority-owned properties. They call it community-responsive policing. Jenkins explained, her voice barely above a whisper. But it's just harassment with a fancy name. I joined to protect people, not intimidate them. In Montgomery's corner office downtown, a notification appeared on his phone, a text from Officer Schultz. Problem at station, federal involvement, need cleanup. Montgomery immediately called Senator Lawrence in Washington, unaware that every digital communication was now being intercepted and cataloged by Layla. James, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. He began explaining the detention of a federal official with potential access to their neighborhood preservation program. The senator promised to make calls, leverage influence, ensure this misunderstanding disappeared. Neither man realized their conversation was being simultaneously transcribed, analyzed, and added to Maya's growing evidence file. As night fell, Maya returned to her Oak Ridge Heights home, now under discreet Umbra protection protocols. Her front door had been vandalized with spray paint, a crude racial slur barely visible under the hasty cleaning attempt by embarrassed officers. Inside, she convened virtually with her team to assess their findings. This isn't isolated to two racist officers, she concluded. We're looking at a coordinated system involving police leadership, wealthy developers, and political protection. The question is how far it extends and how many communities are affected. The team's preliminary analysis suggested similar patterns in at least 7 other affluent communities across 3 states, all with connections to Montgomery's Development Corporation. Options, Maya asked, reviewing potential responses. Jackson outlined tactical approaches to gathering additional evidence. Layla detailed digital vulnerabilities they could exploit. Omar presented statistical analyses demonstrating the financial impact of these discriminatory practices. Dr. Cooper suggested psychological pressure points to fracture the conspiracy's internal trust. We proceed methodically, Maya decided. This isn't just about my incident. It's about dismantling a system that has harmed countless families and corrupted public institutions. As she concluded the briefing, her secure phone rang with a call from Captain Reeves. Dr. Wilson. His voice was tense. Officer Schultz has just been reported accessing sealed records in our database. He's looking for information about you, and he's made calls to several blocked numbers. I think you should know. He's not backing down, and neither are his connections. Maya thanked him for the warning, unsurprised. The confrontation was shifting from a single incident to something much larger. The next moves would determine whether this system of discrimination would be exposed and dismantled, or whether powerful forces would once again succeed in burying evidence of their crimes. Officer Schultz would soon discover that targeting Maya Wilson was the most consequential mistake of his career, one that would ultimately expose decades of systematic injustice and change the power dynamics of an entire community. The morning news cycle erupted with a carefully crafted narrative. Federal agent causes disturbance in exclusive neighborhood, read the headline on the local station's website, accompanied by selectively edited body cam footage showing only Maya's refusal to comply with officer commands, conveniently omitting the preceding interactions. The story quoted anonymous police sources, describing a belligerent woman who had escalated a routine inquiry with aggressive behavior. Richard Montgomery moved with practiced efficiency, activating a network of allies developed over decades of maintaining Oak Ridge Heights' exclusive character. Media contacts received prepared statements emphasizing community safety concerns and the challenges officers faced, distinguishing between legitimate residents and potential criminals. Political connections applied subtle pressure to contain potential investigations. Law enforcement unions issued statements supporting officers' discretion in high-value neighborhoods. Within hours, a coordinated pushback was underway, transforming Maya from victim to aggressor in the public narrative. Senator James Lawrence placed a series of calls from his Washington office, reaching the FBI Director, Department of Justice officials, and state political leaders. His message combined concern and subtle intimidation. This incident was being blown out of proportion, could unnecessarily damage community relations, and might reflect poorly on agencies that pursued it. What Lawrence didn't realize was that Director Mills recorded every call, adding each to the growing evidence file. The senator seems particularly invested in local policing matters, Mills noted dryly to his deputy after the fourth call. Maya returned from an early morning run to find her mailbox smashed and spray-painted with a racial slur. Her front windows displayed fresh egg stains. Her security system, enhanced by Umbra protocols, had captured clear images of 3 teenagers carrying out the vandalism at 4:17 a.m., their vehicle registered to the son of an Oak Ridge Heights Association board member. Rather than anger, Maya felt cold certainty that she had uncovered something significant. Powerful people were responding with disproportionate force to what should have been a simple misconduct complaint. The Umbra team's protective measures activated seamlessly around her property. Invisible to casual observation, advanced surveillance systems monitored approach routes. Signal jammers prevented electronic eavesdropping. Jackson Reed established a rotation of team members maintaining discreet presence in the neighborhood. Any further attempts at intimidation would be documented with unimpeachable precision. Inside the police department, internal battle lines were being drawn. Captain Reeves faced mounting pressure from the police union and friendly politicians to handle this situation appropriately. Officer Schultz enjoyed surprising support from fellow officers who viewed Maya's complaints as an attack on police autonomy. Sergeant Rodriguez and a smaller group of officers, mostly women and minorities, recognized the pattern all too clearly. They had seen similar scenarios play out whenever accountability threatened entrenched interests. The department's internal affairs investigation, initially launched with apparent seriousness, had been effectively neutralized through procedural delays and jurisdictional questions. Maya visited New Hope Baptist Church that Sunday, the oldest African-American congregation in the county. After the service, Pastor Michael Thompson introduced her to community members with similar experiences in Oak Ridge Heights and surrounding affluent areas. Darius Freeman, a cardiothoracic surgeon, described being stopped 3 times in his first week after moving to the neighborhood. Rebecca Washington, an appellate court judge, had found police vehicles parked outside her home nightly for 2 months until she relocated. Thomas Carter, a business executive, recounted officers questioning his children while they played in their own yard. Each story followed the same pattern: harassment justified as community safety, escalating when complaints were filed, mysteriously ceasing when properties were sold at losses. Maya listened with focused intensity, connecting these testimonies to the statistical patterns her team had identified. "This isn't random," she explained to the gathered group. "It's systematic exclusion hiding behind badges and legal terminology." Civil rights attorney Eliza Washington, who had represented several victims in unsuccessful complaints, provided additional documentation. "The problem is proving coordination," she explained. "Each incident individually can be explained away as officer discretion or legitimate policing. It's the pattern that reveals the truth, but courts look at individual cases, not patterns." Across town, Montgomery convened an emergency meeting with select association members and Officers Schultz and Delaney in his private club's secure conference room. Unaware of Umbra's surveillance capabilities, they believed their discussion was confidential. "This Wilson situation requires immediate resolution," Montgomery stated, his manicured hands folded calmly on the polished table. "Our neighborhood integrity program has been too successful to be derailed by one incident." Schultz appeared agitated, his confidence replaced by nervous energy. "She's connected, Rich. This isn't some college professor we can intimidate into moving. Her credentials are real, and they're scary." Montgomery's smile remained unchanged. "Everyone has vulnerabilities, officer. Our friends in various agencies are conducting thorough background investigations. Senator Lawrence has assured me this matter can be contained through appropriate channels." What none of them realized was that every word was being recorded, every participant identified, and added to an expanding investigation that now extended far beyond Maya's original detention. The counterattack against Maya escalated throughout the week. Her home security system thwarted 2 attempted break-ins. Anonymous threats arrived by mail and email. Credit agencies mysteriously flagged her accounts for suspicious activity. Insurance companies sent cancellation notices citing undisclosed risk factors. Professional contacts received anonymous concerns about her stability and judgment. Each attack was meticulously documented, traced to its source, and added to the evidence Maya was assembling. Montgomery's network was extensive and well-practiced, but it had never encountered an adversary with Umbra's capabilities and Maya's strategic vision. The department's union representative approached Captain Reeves with a proposal. If Dr. Wilson would accept a formal apology and modest settlement, the department would implement additional cultural sensitivity training and consider revising some procedures. The subtext was clear. They were offering superficial changes to avoid addressing the systematic discrimination. Maya declined without hesitation. "This isn't about an apology or a settlement," she explained to a frustrated Reeves. "This is about accountability for a system that has harmed countless citizens." Reeves, caught between institutional loyalty and growing ethical concerns, looked genuinely troubled. "Dr. Wilson, you're making powerful enemies. These people have influence extending to federal levels. Your career, your reputation, even your safety could be at risk if you pursue this." Maya's response was measured. "Captain, I appreciate your concern. But understand this, the people threatening me have no conception of who they're dealing with or the resources at my disposal. They believe their power exists in a vacuum because no one has challenged them effectively. That's about to change." That evening, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Officer Sarah Jenkins arrived at her door, visibly nervous but determined. "They know I gave you information," she said once inside. "My patrol assignments have changed. My locker was vandalized. Schultz told me directly to choose the right side." Maya studied the young officer thoughtfully. "Are you concerned for your safety?" Jenkins nodded. "Not just mine. My brother's restaurant suddenly has health inspectors visiting daily. My mother's nursing home called about insurance complications. They're sending a message." The systematic intimidation of witnesses confirmed Maya's assessment. This wasn't merely about protecting 2 officers from misconduct charges. This was about preserving a lucrative system of housing discrimination with tentacles extending throughout local governance. Maya made a decision. "Officer Jenkins, I can offer you protection, real protection beyond what you might imagine possible. In return, I need your continued cooperation and testimony." Jenkins looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. "These people have been running this county for generations. No one has ever successfully challenged them." Maya's expression remained calm, but her eyes reflected absolute certainty. "That's because they've never faced someone like me before. I specialize in dismantling systems that believe themselves untouchable." Later that night, Maya received a call from an unlisted number. The male voice was cultured, confident, accustomed to authority. "Dr. Wilson, this is Richard Montgomery. I think it's time we discussed this situation like reasonable people finding a mutually beneficial resolution." The implicit threat beneath his polished tone was unmistakable. Maya's response was brief and precise. "Mr. Montgomery, I agree completely. I look forward to resolving this situation through comprehensive justice and systematic reform. I suggest you consult with competent legal counsel immediately. Good evening." As she ended the call, Maya reviewed the day's developments with her team. The pattern was clear. Montgomery's network was responding with escalating pressure, revealing connections and vulnerabilities with each move. Their opponents believed themselves engaged in a simple intimidation campaign against an isolated individual. They had no conception that they were actually facing one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations ever deployed on American soil, led by a woman whose strategic brilliance had dismantled terrorist networks and toppled corrupt regimes. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days after Montgomery's call, Maya implemented her comprehensive strategy. The Umbra team transitioned from intelligence gathering to active operations, each member executing precisely defined missions within a coordinated framework. Jackson Reed, leveraging impeccable credentials as a state police investigator, gained official access to the department's Internal Affairs Division. The governor's office has concerns about potential liability issues. He explained to the department's increasingly nervous leadership his presence a constant reminder of scrutiny from above. His tactical experience allowed him to identify officers potentially willing to break ranks, those with clean records, those passed over for promotion despite exemplary service, those whose complaints about departmental practices had been ignored. Layla Chen constructed a digital architecture that would ensure transparency when the evidence eventually became public. Financial records documenting the relationship between targeted enforcement and property devaluations. Communications proving coordination between police leadership and the Oak Ridge Heights Association. Statistical analyses demonstrating the impossibility of the enforcement patterns occurring randomly. Each data set was secured, authenticated, and prepared for eventual disclosure through channels that would prevent suppression. Omar Patel meticulously connected the network's financial components, tracing money flowing between Montgomery's development companies, police foundation donations, campaign contributions to supportive politicians, and property transactions following harassment campaigns. The pattern extended beyond Oak Ridge Heights to 7 other exclusive communities across 3 states, all following identical methods of systematic discrimination concealed behind neighborhood integrity initiatives. Maya formed a strategic alliance with civil rights attorney Eliza Washington, providing her with carefully selected evidence that could initiate legal proceedings without revealing Umbra's involvement. Together, they established a community coalition, including affected residents, reform-minded officers like Sarah Jenkins, and local clergy led by Pastor Thompson. Each person represented a thread in the tapestry of testimony that would eventually expose the entire operation. Have you ever witnessed discrimination that seemed too organized to be coincidental? Comment number 1. If you believe systematic racism often hides behind community safety concerns, or number 2, if you think these incidents are usually isolated. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're inspired by Maya's methodical approach to fighting institutional prejudice. The question remains, can even the most sophisticated strategy overcome decades of entrenched discrimination protected by powerful interests? Will Officer Jenkins and other witnesses stand firm when the pressure intensifies? Let's continue with this extraordinary story of justice in the making. Montgomery's network responded with increasingly aggressive countermeasures, unaware they were being manipulated into revealing additional evidence and connections. Anonymous property damage escalated to slashed tires on Maya's vehicle. Intimidating late-night drive-bys targeted community coalition members. Online smear campaigns questioned Maya's professional competence and mental stability. Each action was meticulously documented, traced to its source, and added to the expanding evidence file. Maya deliberately maintained a visible presence in the community, appearing vulnerable while carefully controlling actual exposure. She attended neighborhood association meetings, directly challenging Montgomery's authority in his traditional domain. She visited local businesses, building relationships with owners and employees. She walked her neighborhood daily, acknowledging surveillance vehicles with casual waves that disconcerted their occupants. Her apparent fearlessness, despite escalating threats, created growing uncertainty among Montgomery's allies. Officer Schultz's behavior became increasingly erratic as pressure mounted. His confrontational approach and racial comments, once tacitly accepted within the department, now drew uncomfortable scrutiny. During roll call, he openly referred to Maya as that troublemaker who needs to be taught her place, unaware that multiple officers were now documenting his statements. His certainty that powerful protection would shield him from consequences led to increasingly explicit threats, each carefully recorded and added to Maya's evidence. Inside the FBI, Director Mills navigated complex political currents. Senator Lawrence had escalated his intervention, now suggesting that national security concerns might require limiting any investigation into the Oak Ridge Heights situation. The community houses several individuals with sensitive positions, Lawrence explained, during a private meeting, his concern for security transparently false. Disruption of community policing models could create unnecessary vulnerabilities. Mills maintained appropriate diplomatic responses while secretly authorizing additional resources to support Maya's operation. The strategic inflection point came when Maya's team discovered a document linking Montgomery's neighborhood integrity model to similar operations in 23 communities across 12 states. What had appeared to be localized discrimination was revealed as a systematic national program deliberately exploiting law enforcement to maintain housing segregation while generating enormous profits through property manipulation. The document, authored by a think tank funded by Montgomery's Foundation, detailed methods for creating demographic stability through proactive community safety initiatives, euphemisms for the systematic harassment of minority homeowners. Maya shared this revelation with Captain Reeves during a private meeting. The veteran officer's face reflected genuine shock as he reviewed the evidence. "This goes far beyond Schultz and Delaney," he whispered, the implications sinking in. "This is the entire basis for our community policing model." His decades of police service had been unknowingly placed in service of systematic discrimination. "I became an officer to protect people," he said, his voice strained, "not to help rich developers maintain segregated neighborhoods." Maya offered him a choice. "Captain, you can be part of the problem's continuation, or you can be instrumental in its solution. There are officers in your department who've recognized the injustice but lack the power to address it. They need leadership." Reeves' decision to support reform efforts marked a crucial shift in departmental dynamics. His quiet authority influenced officers who had remained on the sidelines, creating an internal coalition committed to exposing the truth. When Montgomery learned of Reeves's changing position, he convened an emergency meeting with Senator Lawrence and key allies at his private estate. Unaware of Umbra's surveillance capabilities, they spoke openly about containing the situation through political pressure, strategic reassignments, and, if necessary, manufactured scandals to discredit key witnesses. "We've maintained neighborhood standards for 30 years using these methods," Montgomery reminded the gathered power brokers. "We can't allow one incident to undermine a system that has generated billions in protected property values." Their conversation revealed connections to judge selections, prosecutor appointments, and regulatory decisions affecting everything from zoning to infrastructure development. An entire shadow governance system built around maintaining segregated wealth. Senator Lawrence assured the group of continued protection from federal oversight. "I've spoken directly with agency directors. This local matter will remain local." None of them realized that Maya had strategically positioned evidence to ensure no single point of intervention could stop the investigation. Revelations would emerge simultaneously through multiple channels: state police, civil litigation, community testimony, and media investigations. The network's attempts to block one path would simply activate alternative routes to exposure. Officer Sarah Jenkins faced the most direct intimidation as her role became known. Her apartment was vandalized. False complaints appeared in her personnel file. Her family received threatening calls. Rather than retreating, she documented each incident with Maya's guidance, building a compelling record of witness tampering. When Officer Schultz confronted her in the station parking lot, his threatening behavior was captured by surveillance cameras Jenkins didn't know existed. "You picked the wrong side," he growled, blocking her path to her car. "Montgomery has friends everywhere. They can make people disappear from their jobs, from their homes, from their lives, if necessary." His explicit threats, intended to terrify Jenkins into silence, instead provided crucial evidence of the conspiracy's methods and reach. The confrontation ended only when another officer approached, prompting Schultz to retreat with a final warning. "Think about your future, Jenkins. This Wilson woman will move on, but you'll be stuck here with us." Maya's strategic planning anticipated the network's escalation paths. When Montgomery attempted to pressure Maya's neighbors into filing noise complaints, Umbra's surveillance documented the solicitation of false reports. When Schultz arranged for traffic enforcement targeting coalition members, dashboard cameras captured his explicit instructions to officers. When anonymous online attacks questioned Maya's professional history, prepared profiles appeared documenting her distinguished career and numerous commendations. Each countermeasure was met with prepared responses that further revealed the network's methods and members. Through careful cultivation of media contacts, Maya ensured that when the story eventually broke, it would be comprehensive and irrefutable. Journalist Cameron Park received selected evidence documenting the pattern across multiple communities with statistical analyses demonstrating the impossibility of random correlation. Local television reporter Sophia Chen obtained testimony from affected families, creating compelling personal narratives of the discrimination's human cost. National publications received financial analyses showing the billions generated through systematic housing manipulation. Maya's strategic patience allowed the operation to develop methodically, gathering momentum, while the opposition exhausted resources on ineffective countermeasures. When Montgomery made his final attempt at direct intimidation, approaching Maya in the country club parking lot with 2 security personnel, she was prepared for the confrontation. "Dr. Wilson," he began, his tone conversationally pleasant despite the implicit threat of his companions, "this situation has become unnecessarily adversarial. I'm authorized to offer you a significant accommodation, 7 figures confidential with immediate transfer to any property in our national portfolio. In return, we simply require your discretion regarding local policing matters." Maya studied him with clinical detachment, noting his expensive suit, practiced smile, and the absolute certainty of privilege that had never faced meaningful challenge. "Mr. Montgomery," she replied calmly, "I'm not interested in accommodation. I'm interested in justice. Not just for myself, but for every family your neighborhood integrity program has harmed over the past 3 decades. The only accommodation I'll accept is comprehensive reform and full accountability." Montgomery's facade cracked momentarily, revealing genuine confusion. The concept that his power and money might not resolve this situation had never seriously occurred to him. "You're making a serious mistake," he said, his voice hardening. "Nobody rejects an offer like this. Nobody." Maya's smile contained no warmth. "I'm not nobody, Mr. Montgomery, and you're about to learn exactly what that means." As she walked away, Maya knew the strategic phase was reaching its culmination. The evidence was secured, witnesses prepared, legal frameworks established. Montgomery and his network had revealed their methods, their members, and their vulnerabilities through predictable responses to carefully designed provocations. What remained was the transition to the decisive phase, the coordinated action that would transform individual incidents into irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination. That transition would begin with an unexpected catalyst: Officer Schultz's deteriorating self-control and growing desperation as he sensed his protection crumbling. The unmarked sedan followed Maya for 7 blocks before making its move. As she turned into the deserted community center parking lot, The vehicle accelerated, cutting sharply across her path and forcing her to brake hard. Officer Schultz emerged alone and visibly agitated, his service weapon drawn but held at his side. "Get out of the car, Wilson," he demanded, his voice unsteady. "You and I are going to settle this now." Maya assessed the situation with practiced calm, noting the absence of witnesses, Schultz's erratic movements, and the dash cam she had installed capturing everything. She exited slowly, hands visible, maintaining distance. "Officer Schultz, you're making another serious mistake." His laugh was harsh, brittle with stress. "No, you made the mistake. You should have taken Montgomery's money and disappeared. Now it's too late." 36 hours earlier, Montgomery's carefully constructed network had begun experiencing systematic failures. Federal banking regulators had unexpectedly frozen accounts associated with his development companies, citing compliance concerns. 3 judges who had reliably dismissed discrimination complaints suddenly recused themselves from pending cases. The state attorney general's office announced a preliminary review of housing discrimination patterns in affluent communities. Senator Lawrence discovered his confidential communications with Montgomery had been leaked to ethics investigators. Each development was strategically timed, the culmination of Maya's methodical approach to dismantling the network's foundations before confronting its public facade. Montgomery's response was predictably aggressive. Media outlets received packets containing manufactured evidence questioning Maya's mental stability, therapy records that never existed, incident reports from jurisdictions she had never visited, concerns from colleagues she had never worked with. Each fabrication was immediately countered with authenticated evidence of manipulation, further documenting the conspiracy's methods. Property developers with connections to Montgomery's operations initiated sudden foreclosure proceedings against community coalition members, discovering too late that their mortgages had been purchased by anonymous entities that immediately suspended the actions. Private investigators hired to find compromising information on Maya's team instead found themselves under scrutiny when their illegal surveillance methods were anonymously reported to authorities. The network's coordinated power, accustomed to overwhelming isolated individuals through simultaneous pressure from multiple directions, found itself fragmented and reactive, each component exposed and neutralized through precise countermeasures. In the police department, the internal power balance shifted decisively when Captain Reeves formally requested state oversight of pending discrimination complaints. Officers who had tacitly supported discriminatory practices through silence now distanced themselves from Schultz and Delaney, recognizing the changing dynamics. Officer Jenkins and 11 colleagues submitted formal statements documenting systematic targeting of minority residents in affluent neighborhoods, creating a critical mass of testimony that couldn't be dismissed as isolated complaints. Now, in the empty parking lot, Schultz represented the network's desperation. Unmoored from strategic direction, operating on instinct and fear. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his weapon now raised and pointed at Maya. 15 years building a career following the program, playing by the rules. Gone because you couldn't just accept how things work here. Maya maintained her composure, analyzing options, calculating risks. Her Umbra training included extensive experience with armed confrontations, but her objective remained minimizing violence while maximizing evidence collection. The program was illegal, Officer Schultz. The rules were discriminatory. Your career was built on systematic civil rights violations. His expression twisted with genuine confusion and anger. It was good policing, keeping neighborhoods safe, maintaining standards. Everyone knew the system. Politicians, judges, business leaders. Everyone approved. Maya recognized the crisis point, the moment when perpetrators of systematic injustice confront the contradiction between their self-image as upholders of order and the reality of their participation in oppression. Montgomery's program wasn't about safety, she explained calmly. It was about property values and exclusion. You weren't protecting communities, you were enforcing segregation for profit. Schultz's weapon wavered slightly. "You can't prove any of that. It's just enforcement patterns, officer discretion. Nothing connects it directly to Montgomery or anyone else." Maya's slight smile triggered immediate alarm in Schultz's expression. "Actually, officer, we have the complete documentation, internal communications, financial transfers, statistical analyses, witness testimony, and now your armed confrontation of a federal official, all comprehensively documented." She gestured subtly toward her vehicle's dashboard camera. "Including this conversation." The realization that he had been manipulated into providing explicit confirmation struck Schultz visibly. His weapon lowered slightly as calculation replaced anger. Witness testimony can be discredited. Officers can recant statements under pressure. Evidence can disappear. Montgomery still has enough influence to bury this. Maya's response was measured. "That might have been true 3 days ago. It's not true anymore." At 10 o'clock this morning, comprehensive evidence packages were delivered simultaneously to the FBI Department of Justice Civil Rights Division State Attorney General, 3 federal judges, and 7 national news organizations. The operation you've been part of is now exposed beyond any possibility of containment. The parking lot fell silent as Schultz processed this information, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, the beginning of fear. His weapon lowered further. What happens now? The question contained multiple layers: personal consequences, departmental impact, community implications. Maya addressed each level. "You personally face serious charges, civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and now attempted intimidation of a federal official. The department will undergo comprehensive reform under external oversight. Montgomery's network will be dismantled through multiple prosecutions and civil actions. The communities affected will receive substantive remediation." She paused, then added, "However, cooperation at this stage would be considered in sentencing recommendations." The implied offer of reduced consequences in exchange for testimony against higher-level conspirators hung between them. Before Schultz could respond, patrol cars entered the parking lot from multiple directions. Captain Reeves had been monitoring the situation through Maya's emergency alert system and responded with carefully selected officers loyal to departmental integrity rather than the old power structure. Schultz surrendered without further resistance, his defiance collapsing into resignation as he was taken into custody by former colleagues. Across town, similar scenes unfolded simultaneously. FBI agents executed search warrants at Montgomery's offices, securing digital and physical records before they could be destroyed. State police investigators arrived at the homes and businesses of association board members connected to the discrimination program. Senator Lawrence received formal notice of Ethics Committee investigation into his intervention attempts. The network that had operated with impunity for decades, systematically excluding minorities from affluent communities while generating billions in protected property values, faced comprehensive exposure and dismantling. Maya's Umbra team transitioned seamlessly from investigation to evidence preservation, ensuring that no component of the conspiracy could escape accountability through document destruction or witness intimidation. Their precision operations, invisible to conventional observation, secured critical information from multiple locations simultaneously. The crisis point had been navigated successfully. The confrontation with Schultz had provided final confirmation of the conspiracy while avoiding violence, and the coordinated response had prevented the network from mounting effective countermeasures. As night fell, Maya stood on the porch of her Oak Ridge Heights home, surveying the neighborhood that had been the epicenter of systematic discrimination for decades. Police vehicles were visible at strategic locations, not as instruments of intimidation, but as protection for residents who had come forward with testimony. News vans gathered at the community center where Captain Reeves had announced the formation of a joint task force to investigate discriminatory policing patterns. Montgomery's mansion across the lake remained dark, its owner having been taken into federal custody hours earlier. The immediate battle had been won, but Maya understood that dismantling entrenched systems required more than arresting key participants. True justice would require structural reforms, community healing, and vigilance against the reconstitution of discrimination under new guises. The coming days would determine whether this victory marked a genuine transformation or merely a temporary disruption of deeply rooted injustice. For tonight, however, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The operation had unfolded with strategic precision, minimizing harm while maximizing impact. The community had found its voice and its power, and those who had believed themselves untouchable had discovered that no system of oppression, no matter how powerful its protectors, could withstand the combined force of methodical intelligence, strategic patience, and unwavering commitment to justice. Morning sunlight streamed through Maya's kitchen windows as she reviewed the operation's status with her team. Overnight developments had exceeded even their optimistic projections. Federal agents had seized over 17,000 documents from Montgomery's various offices, uncovering evidence of discriminatory practices extending back 27 years and involving 34 communities across 14 states. The financial scope had expanded dramatically, with preliminary estimates suggesting the program had generated over $4 billion in manipulated property values. Captain Reeves had implemented emergency departmental reforms, reassigning officers with troubling complaint patterns and establishing community oversight protocols. Most significantly, witnesses previously intimidated into silence were coming forward in unprecedented numbers, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic discrimination that no political intervention could possibly suppress. Next phase, Jackson Ask Professional, as always focused on operational objectives rather than celebrating preliminary success. Maya outlined the transition from exposure to accountability. The network is destabilized but not yet dismantled. Senator Lawrence retained significant influence to potentially limit consequences. Montgomery's financial resources remain largely intact despite the account freezes. The police union is already mobilizing to defend officers involved. We need to consolidate evidence, secure additional testimony, and ensure comprehensive rather than symbolic accountability. Each team member received specific assignments focusing on their expertise. Jackson would work with state police to secure additional evidence before potential destruction. Layla would trace the network's digital communications to identify participants who might otherwise escape accountability. Omar would analyze financial records to document the full economic impact of the discrimination program. The others would support these primary objectives while maintaining protective measures around key witnesses. Maya's phone rang, FBI Director Mills providing an update on federal response. The Attorney General has authorized a full civil rights investigation, he reported. Preliminary injunctions against Montgomery's companies will be filed today. Senator Lawrence is facing mounting pressure to recuse himself from any involvement due to clear conflicts of interest. Maya thanked him for the update, then asked the critical question, any signs of political intervention to limit the investigation's scope? Mills' hesitation was brief, but noticeable. There have been calls from certain quarters suggesting community stability concerns, nothing that will impede us at this stage, but we're monitoring potential pressure points. Translation: powerful interests connected to Montgomery's network were already seeking to contain damage through high-level intervention. Maya had anticipated this response and prepared accordingly. The evidence distributed to multiple agencies and media outlets ensured no single point of suppression could stop the investigation. If federal authorities faced political constraints, state prosecutors could proceed independently. If official channels encountered obstacles, media exposure would maintain public pressure. The redundant accountability paths formed an interlocking system resistant to traditional influence methods. At the police station, Maya met with Captain Reeves to review community protection measures. Officers with clean records had been assigned to patrol neighborhoods where witnesses resided, ensuring no further intimidation occurred. Department communications were being monitored for any coordination with remaining network members. Most importantly, a secure reporting system had been established for residents to document any continuing discrimination attempts. Officer Schultz has requested a meeting, Reeves informed her. His attorney indicates he may be willing to provide testimony against Montgomery and others in exchange for consideration. Maya considered the strategic implications. Schultz represented a potential source of direct evidence connecting departmental practices to Montgomery's program, potentially accelerating accountability for higher-level participants. Arrange the meeting with appropriate security protocols, she decided, but make no commitments until we assess the value and authenticity of his information. The confrontation with Montgomery occurred in an unexpected location. The federal courthouse, where he had been arraigned on initial charges of conspiracy witness, intimidation, and civil rights violations. Maya encountered him in a hallway outside the courtroom, accompanied by his legal team. Despite his situation, Montgomery maintained the confident bearing of someone accustomed to navigating legal challenges through connections rather than innocence. "Dr. Wilson," he acknowledged with forced civility, "I understand you're the architect of this unfortunate situation." Maya studied him with clinical detachment. "The situation is of your creation, Mr. Montgomery. I merely exposed what you built." His attorneys attempted to intervene, but Montgomery waved them off, clearly believing in his ability to resolve conflicts through direct negotiation. "We both know how these matters typically conclude," he said, lowering his voice to avoid being overheard. "Initial headlines, preliminary charges, then gradual resolution through appropriate channels. Careers need not be destroyed over policy disagreements." Maya recognized the attempt to reframe systematic discrimination as mere policy disagreement, a common tactic when oppressive systems face accountability. "This isn't following the usual pattern," she informed him calmly. "The evidence is comprehensive, witnesses are protected, and multiple accountability paths are activated beyond your network's influence range. Your program of systematic housing discrimination has been exposed at a fundamental level that no amount of influence can overcome." For the first time, genuine uncertainty flickered across Montgomery's expression. His confidence in system manipulation had never confronted failure. "Senator Lawrence assures me this situation remains manageable," he countered, revealing his continued belief in political protection. Maya's response was measured but absolute. "Senator Lawrence's communications with you regarding this matter have been documented and provided to ethics investigators. His ability to intervene is compromised. More importantly, the evidence now exists in too many independent channels for any single authority to suppress." As reality began penetrating Montgomery's certainty, his composure fractured slightly. "Do you have any concept of the consequences of disrupting established community structures? The property value implications alone could affect thousands of innocent homeowners." Maya recognized the final defensive position of discriminatory systems, claiming that accountability for injustice might harm innocent bystanders. "The economic impacts of systematic discrimination have harmed far more people for decades," she countered. "The transition to equitable practices may create temporary market adjustments, but justice cannot be subordinated to property values. That prioritization was the fundamental flaw in your program from the beginning." Their conversation ended as Montgomery's attorneys finally succeeded in separating him from this damaging interaction. As he was led away, Maya noted the changed perspective in his eyes, the first recognition that his actions might actually carry consequences despite his wealth and connections. The meeting with Officer Schultz proved strategically valuable. Facing severe charges and abandoned by former protectors, he provided detailed testimony about the department's role in Montgomery's program. Officers received informal direction about priority enforcement areas that consistently corresponded with properties owned by minority residents. Performance evaluations rewarded those who generated stops and citations in targeted neighborhoods. Montgomery's association provided community safety grants that funded overtime specifically for increased patrols in areas where unwanted residents had purchased homes. Most damaging was Schultz's confirmation of explicit discussions about maintaining neighborhood demographics during meetings between police leadership and association representatives. His testimony, while motivated by self-interest, provided direct evidence of intentional discrimination that could overcome claims of coincidental enforcement patterns. The coordinated operation culminated in simultaneous actions across multiple jurisdictions. Federal civil rights prosecutors filed comprehensive charges against Montgomery and 16 associates documenting decades of systematic discrimination. State authorities initiated professional misconduct proceedings against judges and prosecutors who had dismissed valid complaints. The police department was placed under court-ordered monitoring with meaningful community oversight provisions. Media outlets published detailed investigations exposing the national scope of similar neighborhood integrity programs. Most importantly, affected communities began organizing for substantive reforms beyond individual prosecutions. Maya convened a final strategic assessment with her team, evaluating outcomes against objectives. The primary goal had been achieved. The systematic discrimination program had been exposed and dismantled beyond possibility of reconstitution under its current form. Key participants faced meaningful accountability through multiple channels. Affected communities had gained effective voice in reform implementation. The broader pattern had been documented nationally, preventing similar programs from operating undetected in other jurisdictions. Transition to sustainability phase, Maya directed. Our direct involvement concludes, but we maintain monitoring protocols to ensure reforms are implemented effectively. Priority is preventing retaliation against witnesses and establishing structural changes that outlast initial intervention. The team acknowledged the directive, each understanding their role in the operation's final phase. Their presence would gradually diminish as local institutions demonstrated capacity for self-correction, but oversight would continue until sustainable reform was confirmed. As the operation shifted from direct intervention to supportive monitoring, Maya reflected on the transformation witnessed in such a short period. A system of oppression that had operated with impunity for decades had been fundamentally disrupted. Not through violence or revolutionary upheaval, but through strategic intelligence application, community empowerment, and methodical evidence deployment. The crisis point had passed, the decisive moves executed with precision. What remained was ensuring the victory translated into lasting change rather than symbolic gestures followed by regression to discriminatory patterns under new guises. That sustainability challenge would ultimately determine whether this operation represented momentary disruption or genuine transformation in how power and race intersected in American communities. 6 months after Officer Schultz's arrest, Maya stood before the newly established Community Oversight Board in the renovated Town Hall meeting room. The diverse group of 15 residents, including individuals who had previously been targeted by discriminatory policing, now held substantial authority over departmental policies and officer accountability. The quarterly data shows promising trends, Maya explained, displaying charts illustrating enforcement patterns across neighborhood demographics. Traffic stops show statistical parity across racial groups for the first time in departmental history. Complaint resolution timelines have decreased by 63%. Officer diversity has increased through the new recruitment program. Captain Reeves, recently promoted to interim chief following his predecessor's resignation, nodded in agreement. The department culture is changing, though we still have significant work ahead. Officers initially resistant to oversight have seen that fair policing practices actually improve community relations and officer safety simultaneously. The transformation extended far beyond policing reforms. Richard Montgomery awaited sentencing after pleading guilty to multiple federal charges, his once formidable network of influence systematically dismantled. His development corporation had been placed under court-supervised receivership with profits from properties acquired through discriminatory practices directed toward community reinvestment programs. Senator Lawrence had announced his retirement following Ethics Committee investigations, creating opportunity for new leadership untainted by connection to housing discrimination schemes. Most significantly, Oak Ridge Heights itself had begun a genuine integration process. Property values had initially fluctuated as market manipulation ended, but had stabilized at levels reflecting true value rather than artificial exclusivity premiums. New families from diverse backgrounds had purchased homes without facing the systematic harassment that had previously forced minority residents to leave. Community events now reflected genuine inclusion rather than tokenized diversity for appearance sake. After the board meeting, Maya walked through the neighborhood with Jackson discussing the operation's long-term impact. Structural change rather than symbolic gestures, she noted with satisfaction. The discrimination program operated for 27 years before we intervened. The reforms should demonstrate sustainability for at least that long to be considered truly successful. Jackson nodded, professional as always, but allowing a rare smile. The protection protocols for witnesses have been reduced to monitoring status. No intimidation attempts in over 3 months. Community reporting systems show continued engagement rather than declining participation. Maya's assessment remained measured despite clear progress. Montgomery's associates in other jurisdictions have modified their approaches, becoming more subtle in implementation while maintaining similar objectives. We've disrupted the methodology, but not eliminated the underlying motivation for housing discrimination. Their conversation was interrupted by Sophia Chen, the local reporter, whose coverage had been instrumental in maintaining public attention on the case. Dr. Wilson, do you have a comment on Officer Schultz's testimony against the police union leadership? Sources say he's provided documentation of their role in suppressing previous discrimination complaints. Maya provided a carefully worded response, emphasizing the importance of comprehensive accountability while avoiding prejudgment of specific allegations. After the reporter departed, Jackson raised an eyebrow. "You've become quite diplomatic in public statements." Maya's expression remained neutral. The operation succeeds best when communities own the reforms rather than attributing change to external intervention. Our footprint diminishes as local capacity increases. The Umbra team had indeed maintained its operational discipline throughout the transition phase. Their extraordinary capabilities had been deployed with surgical precision, leaving minimal traces of their involvement as they systematically transferred responsibility to legitimate local authorities. Only Captain Reeves and a handful of others understood the full extent of Maya's resources and authority, maintaining appropriate discretion about the classified aspects of the intervention. Officer Sarah Jenkins had been promoted to lead the department's newly established Community Engagement Division, her courage in coming forward against discrimination recognized through expanded responsibility rather than mere commendation. The officers who had supported reform efforts found themselves advancing in a department now valuing integrity above conformity to problematic traditions. Even Officer Delaney, who had eventually cooperated with investigators, received appropriate consideration in plea negotiations, reflecting his lesser role compared to Schultz and department leadership. Maya's balanced approach to accountability, focused on systematic change rather than punitive excess, had maintained community support throughout the difficult transition period. That evening, Maya hosted a small gathering at her home, not a celebration as she considered the work ongoing, but an acknowledgement of progress and community resilience. Pastor Thompson attended along with attorney Eliza Washington, Officer Jenkins, Captain Reeves, and several residents whose testimony had been crucial to exposing the discrimination program. The conversation focused not on past victories, but on sustainability challenges and continuing reforms. "The hardest part isn't exposing injustice," Maya observed as they discussed ongoing implementation issues. "It's building systems of accountability that survive after public attention inevitably shifts elsewhere. Discriminatory practices adapted over decades. Equitable alternatives require equal persistence. As guests departed, Maya found herself alone with Captain Reeves on her porch, overlooking the neighborhood where her confrontation with Officers Schultz and Delaney had catalyzed such profound change. "There's something I've been wanting to ask," Reeves said carefully. "Your credentials, your resources, your team's capabilities, they go well beyond standard federal authority. Even FBI directors don't command the kind of response you coordinated." Maya's expression remained neutral. "Captain, you've demonstrated exceptional judgment throughout this situation. That judgment should extend to recognizing which questions are better left unasked for both our sakes." Reeves nodded slowly, understanding the boundary. "Fair enough. Whatever your actual role, I'm grateful our department encountered you rather than continuing down our previous path. Real change was long overdue." After Reeves departed, Maya conducted a final security sweep before connecting with her Umbra team through encrypted channels. Status reports, she requested, transitioning back to operational focus. Each team member provided concise updates on their monitoring assignments. Layla confirmed that digital surveillance showed no signs of the discrimination program reconstituting under new management. Omar reported that financial patterns indicated compliant behavior from remaining participants in Montgomery's former network. Jackson verified that physical security monitoring detected no coordinated threats against witnesses or reformed institutions. "Transition to standby status approved," Maya concluded. "Maintain passive monitoring protocols, but redirect primary operational resources. The Oak Ridge Heights mission is officially classified as resolved pending quarterly review." The formality of the language belied the extraordinary nature of what they had accomplished. A deeply entrenched system of discrimination protected by wealth, political influence, and institutional power had been comprehensively dismantled, not through violent confrontation or revolutionary upheaval, but through methodical intelligence application, strategic patience, and precise intervention at critical vulnerability points. 2 days later, Maya met with a young black girl named Amara Jenkins, Officer Jenkins' 12-year-old niece, who had expressed interest in law enforcement as a career. They walked through the community park that had once been an unofficial, whites-only space through selective enforcement of obscure regulations. "My aunt says you changed everything," Amara said with the directness of youth. "She says before you came, people like us couldn't even walk in this park without being stopped by police." Maya considered her response carefully. "Your aunt is the one who changed things," she corrected gently. "She had the courage to speak truth when doing so carried real risk. I just helped create conditions where her courage could have meaningful impact." Amara considered this thoughtfully. "I want to be a police officer who helps people, not one who scares them. Do you think that's possible now?" Maya gestured toward the diverse group of children playing freely on the recently renovated playground. "It's not just possible, it's essential. Communities need protectors who understand justice means serving everyone equally, not maintaining arbitrary boundaries between who belongs and who doesn't." As they continued walking, Maya's secure phone vibrated with a notification. A new Umbra mission required her attention. Another community facing systematic injustice. Another opportunity to transform entrenched discrimination into equitable practices. The cycle continued, each intervention building on lessons from previous operations, each community benefiting from accumulated strategic knowledge about dismantling oppressive systems. Maya took a final look at Oak Ridge Heights, at children playing without fear, at neighbors conversing across previously impermeable social boundaries, at a community beginning to heal from decades of engineered division. The transformation remained imperfect, the work unfinished, the possibility of regression ever present without continued vigilance. but fundamental change had begun demonstrating that even the most powerful systems of discrimination contained inherent vulnerabilities that could be leveraged by those with sufficient strategic vision and unwavering commitment to justice. As she prepared to depart for her next mission, Maya reflected that this represented the ultimate fulfillment of Umbra's purpose, not merely addressing immediate threats, but transforming conditions that generated systemic injustice. The confrontation with Officers Schultz and Delaney had catalyzed change extending far beyond individual accountability, creating ripples that would continue expanding long after her direct involvement concluded. The new order taking shape in Oak Ridge Heights offered a template for similar transformations across a nation still struggling to reconcile its ideals of equality with persistent patterns of discrimination. Progress remained fragile, requiring constant vigilance against regression, but the community had demonstrated capacity for self-correction that inspired cautious optimism about sustainable change. That Maya concluded represented the most meaningful measure of mission success. What did you think about this story of justice and transformation? Has a similar situation happened in your community where discrimination was disguised as maintaining standards or community safety? Comment below with your experiences or thoughts on how we can create lasting change in our own neighborhoods. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to see more powerful stories of justice prevailing against discrimination, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Invisible Authority. Remember that true power often lies with those who are underestimated, and real change happens when we refuse to accept injustice as normal. Until next time. This story illustrates several powerful lessons about confronting systemic racism and discrimination. First, it shows that racism often hides behind seemingly neutral concepts like community safety or neighborhood standards, requiring us to look beyond surface explanations to identify discriminatory patterns. Second, the story demonstrates that dismantling entrenched systems of discrimination requires strategic patience and methodical evidence gathering rather than reactive confrontation. Maya's approach of building comprehensive documentation before taking decisive action ensured that the system could not easily dismiss or contain the exposure. Third, we see that true change requires addressing root causes rather than individual actors. While Officers Schultz and Delaney faced accountability, Maya's focus remained on the larger system that enabled their behavior. Fourth, the story highlights the importance of coalition building across different segments of the community, including reform-minded individuals within the very institutions being challenged. Fifth, it shows that power often relies on isolation, making targets feel alone and unsupported. When communities unite against discrimination, this isolation tactic loses effectiveness. Finally, the story reminds us that transformative justice isn't about revenge, but about creating sustainable change. Maya's measured approach focused on reforming systems rather than merely punishing individuals, recognizing that lasting justice requires changing conditions that allow discrimination to flourish rather than simply removing a few bad actors. Have you ever witnessed discrimination disguised as maintaining standards or community safety in your neighborhood? How did you respond? Comment below with your experiences or thoughts on how we can create lasting change in our own communities. If this story of justice prevailing against racism resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more powerful stories that expose hidden discrimination. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how systemic racism operates in subtle ways. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Invisible Authority. Remember that true power often lies with those who are underestimated, and real change happens when we refuse to accept injustice as normal. Until next time.